Peter Ndoro. Asanda Beda is luckily on holiday today. Yeah, it's a long weekend, so we're going to miss her, but she'll be back next week. So we got a packed program. I'll tell you more about the guests that we'll be talking to, but some of the stories that we're looking at this hour. Kenyan authorities arrest a police constable in connection with the death of a political blogger, Albert Ojwang. And President Cyril Ramaphosa says that South Africa will use the upcoming G7 summit in Canada to promote Africa. We'll have more on these stories and others after the news as we say good morning to Nolutando Buthelezi. It's followed with sports headlines by Figile Lingwati. Good morning.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. Zambia's former president Edgar Lungu, who died last week, left instructions that his successor Hakainde Hichilema should not be anywhere near his body. This is the latest development in the bitter feud over funeral plans for the late president following his death in South Africa at the age of 68. Elizabeth Mapari reports.
The government had planned to fly his body back home on Wednesday, but failed to do so because of a dispute with Lungu's family and his political party, the Patriotic Front, over mourning and funeral arrangements. The two leaders had been long-standing political rivals, with Hichilema defeating Lungu in the 2021 election after failing in 5 previous attempts. The PEF alleged that Lungu was banned from leaving the country for years and that if he had been allowed to travel to seek medical treatment sooner, he might still be alive. The government has denied the allegation. It says it wants to give Lungu, who led Zambia from 2015 to 2021, a state funeral.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will visit areas affected by the recent floods in the Eastern Cape province today in order to assess the damage. The announcement comes as search and rescue operations continue for missing people, including 4 learners who were traveling in a minibus taxi that was swept away by floodwaters. At least 78 people are known to have died and hundreds more have been displaced. Ramaphosa shares his sentiments.
I will be going there tomorrow to go and see exactly how our people are suffering there and how we can console the families and how we can come up with assistant measures from a disaster point of view to give real support to ordinary people, those who have suffered this loss, and we pay our condolences to those families that have lost their loved ones, and how we can support the Eastern Cape government to deal with this disaster.
Kenyan police have fired tear gas to disperse dozens of protesters in Nairobi who were demonstrating against the death of a blogger in police custody. The 31-year-old blogger Albert Ojwang was arrested following a social media post critical of a senior police officer. Police initially claimed he died in his cell after hitting his head against the wall, but government pathologists said that was unlikely and his injuries pointed towards an assault. Kenyan authorities have been accused of harsh crackdown on government critics. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees' latest Global Trends report has revealed that a record 123.2 million people were forcibly displaced by the end of 2024 due to conflict, persecution and rights violations. Sudan has now overtaken Syria as the world's largest displacement crisis. Despite the number of displaced people doubling over the past decade, UNHCR funding has dropped back to 2015 levels. UNHRC Global Spokesperson Eugene Bune.
And then what is most significant of the Sudan number is that the crisis continue, the funding decrease at the same time. And we're heavily depend on the hostility of host community inside of Sudan as well as a neighboring country. And when you see the neighboring country of Sudan, Chad, South Sudan, there is still ongoing challenges in those countries. And top of that, the South Sudan is also having a conflict at the moment, pushing the people toward the Sudan because they literally literally have no choice but to flee to the country who is experiencing the conflict itself.
A court in Taiwan has sentenced a Chinese ship captain to 3 years in prison for damaging an undersea communications cable in the Taiwan Strait. There has been a number of such incidents in recent years off Taiwan, which it blames on China. Beijing denies involvement, saying they are common maritime accidents. The BBC's Warren Bull has the details.
In February, a ship called Hongtai 58 was anchored off Taiwan's southern coast for several days. After the Togolese-registered vessel was ordered to leave, Taiwan's Coast Guard discovered that a fibre optic underwater cable had been severed, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. The ship was escorted back to port, and 7 of its crew were deported to China. The captain, identified by his surname Wang, was tried in a Taiwanese district court. He denied intentionally destroying the cable.
For any news stories that you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Basketball Africa League defending champion Pedro de Luanda pulled off a major upset when they defeated Egypt's Al Ittihad in the first semi-final. And South Africa insists they are confident of chasing down a tough target to win the World Test Championship at Lord's. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Bringing you the energy.
Morning after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you the Africa Roundup, and that's a snapshot of the continent's most significant developments over the past 24 hours, from politics, protests, innovation, international partnerships. We'll be connecting you to the heartbeat of Africa in a concise manner with our team of experts, journalists and commentators, bringing this concise look at the news to keep you up to date. And we start in Kenya, where there's public outrage that continues to grow following the death of political blogger Albert Ojwang whilst he was in police custody. Authorities on Thursday confirmed the arrest of a police constable believed to be linked to his death. Ojwang, who was 31, died 2 days after his arrest, triggering protests across Nairobi and calls for justice.
His death is the latest case to throw a spotlight on the country's security services, who have been accused of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances for years. Ojwang was arrested for allegedly defaming the country's state.
And we turn to South Africa now, where President Cyril Ramaphosa says that his country is using the upcoming G7 summit in Canada to champion Africa's energy transition. He was speaking at the Africa Green Hydrogen Summit in Cape Town. President Ramaphosa says that energy reform must serve the continent's development priorities, balancing sustainability with growth.
During its G20 presidency, South Africa has chosen
The country's largest party, the African National Congress, its youth league is making waves with its latest remarks. The league's president, Colin Malachi, has stirred debate after suggesting that South Africa's next head of state should not be a pensioner. Addressing a youth-focused event, Malachi called for a generational shift and urged more leadership roles for young people in government.
President Ramaphosa must be the last
In Zimbabwe, financial innovation is in focus there. The third Microfinance Technology Summit kicked off in Harare on Thursday, gathering stakeholders from across Africa to explore how digital tools can transform financial inclusion. Zimbabwe's ICT Minister Tatenda Mavetera delivered the opening remarks at the event. And finally, to Zambia now, where the government there has teamed up with Finnish tech company 73 Health Global, and this to roll out a new AI-driven health platform. Now, the system allows patients to consult doctors remotely, receive diagnosis, and access prescriptions, expanding healthcare access across Africa. Finland's ambassador to Zambia is Sana Hanelin.
Combining world-class research, digital expertise, and a strong
In fact, that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you on Monday after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. Coming up shortly, we're going to zone in on North Africa and speak a little bit more about some of the news events that have been taking place in the region.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África. segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais. Este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Your morning companion with is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, so we're going to be crossing to North Africa shortly, and we're going to be talking to one of our regular commentators, Alicia Volkman, about some of the goings-on the continent there. But just before that, I always like to look back in history. We're supposed to be learning from history, but sometimes, sadly, we find history repeating itself. But anyway, 1975, a lot of things were going on in Mozambique in June. It was the final phase of its transition to independence from Portugal, which was eventually granted on June the 25th. But on June the 13th, political negotiations were underway between Frelimo and the outgoing Portuguese regime. And there was rising tensions and celebrations, of course, at the same time, building towards that liberation milestone. And at the front of this was struggle hero Samora Machel. And so Mozambique finally got its independence, 1975, and then sadly spent decades in civil war. Do you remember that? Eventually, that was resolved, and now the new struggle for Mozambicans is the big question of democracy. Is it as robust and as people would want it? Well, we saw protests after the last election suggesting that there's a lot of dissent, particularly amongst young people, in terms of Frelimo being in power for so long. All right, let's go to North Africa now and do our wrap. We turn our attention to that region and the broader Sahel, where political tensions, cyber conflict, human rights trials and migration continue to dominate headlines, from courtroom drama in Algeria to diplomatic friction between neighbors and the latest rescue of migrants in the Mediterranean. It's a region, as you're hearing, experiences both upheaval and movements of cautious calm. Well, to help us unpack the latest, we're now joined by Alicia Volkman, one of our regular commentators, who's a journalist closely following events in North Africa and the Sahel. Alicia, always good to talk to you. How are you today? All right. I don't think she can hear me. We can't hear her. Alicia, can you hear us? All right. Elisa, just check your mute button and see if that isn't on. Alicia? Hello, Alicia? All right. All right. Elisa, are you there?
I am. So I'm just having a few technical difficulties here. Good morning. Good morning.
Happy Friday. So,
hello.
Yeah, no, it's all good here. We're getting into a long weekend. You know, June 16th is a big event on Monday, so it all starts on the Friday. Most people take a time off, except us journalists. Never a day off. Okay.
No, never a day off. No.
So let's start with this rather unique grassroots action in the Maghreb, a convoy of cars and trucks organized by local activists. What's the story behind this, and what does it signal about local sentiment?
Yes, the Al Samud convoy. It's really quite unique that these different groups from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya have organically sort of come together to protest in solidarity with the people of Gaza. It set off on Monday in Tunisia. We've seen different convoys set off individually from different countries, and people have been flying into Cairo as well. And you have to understand that this has been the culmination of regular protests and marches in the different Maghrebi countries, and that the feelings of support for Palestine are something very, very fundamental. Since the Nakba, the horror, this has been a very important cause right across the Arabic world. But I think particularly in the Maghrebi region, these feelings are particularly strong, and particularly in Tunisia. If you remember that the former president, Habib Bourguiba, he very much took on the Palestinian cause as a national cause for Tunisia, to the extent that he gave office space and sanctuary to the PLO. For a long time, Yasser Arafat, who is the leader of the PLO and this iconic symbol of the Palestinian struggle, he and his people were based in Hammam Shot in southern Tunis. And there was a bombing of Hammam Shot where Tunisians died. So that really kind of solidified this feeling of a common cause. And it is also a sentiment about how the sort of colonial, what they see as colonial powers and sort of Western empirical powers actually continuing into the present day. So that's at the heart of this sort of common feeling within the Maghreb. But these are just small organizations, individuals coming together, rallying and getting organized. There are about 100 private cars leaving Tunisia, as well as big buses. And we've seen generosity along the route. As they pass through Libya, people have been giving them food. And indeed, apparently even petrol stations have been donating petrol and diesel to the buses. Things have started to change somewhat since their entry into Egypt. There have actually been 200 activists who've been arrested at the airport or have been searched in their hotels in Cairo. So we're not quite sure how the march towards Rafah, which was meant to start today, is proceeding. We weren't even sure if Egypt was actually going to let people in. It seemed that they did. But we've seen reports of, for example, there were 3 Algerian lawyers who were arrested yesterday as those that entered Cairo airport. So we're waiting for updates about whether the march will proceed and whether they will cross the border at Rafah into Gaza. They're also carrying medical aid and other provisions for the people of Gaza, because I'm sure people have seen the reports about the blockading of aid into Gaza, and according to the UN, only about 20% of aid being provided is actually getting through. Right. So I'm sorry about this. There's a naughty little kitten who wants to be on the podcast as well. So
no, we are very inclusive here.
Just hold the cat rather than try to keep
I'm mindful of time. So let's move to Algeria, where this trial of human rights lawyer Soufiane Ouali is making headlines. He's been charged with terrorism. What are the specifics of the case, and what's been the reaction from civil society and rights groups?
Well, this has been a really long, ongoing case. There's unfortunately an ongoing crackdown on civil rights and civil society members, lawyers, even poets in Algeria. Algeria is a very hardline regime. It's not comfortable with dissenting voices. What's surprising about Ouali's case is that this has gone on for over a year. Initially, back in July last year, he was taken from his house, and for a while he was disappeared. And lawyers and civil society were demanding that the authorities explain where he was, give him access to lawyers. So this has gone on and ground on for some time. So his trial was on Wednesday. And now you're saying you're making headlines. It's actually kind of the reverse. We've been trying hard to actually get the information and find out even if what was the sentence, because Algeria is very, very tight-lipped about this. They want to silence people, but rather than say in Tunisia, where there's also been a political trial here, These trials are very publicized in Tunisia. It's not so much in Algeria. It really is about completely silencing people. This began, waves of it began following the election back in 2019 of Abdelmajid Tebboune, who was re-elected. And prior to that, there had been Al-Haraq. Al-Haraq is Arabic for the movement. And they had been demanding the then President Bouteflika step down, that measures to start fresh elections and to move towards a more open democracy begin. And sure enough, there were elections. They got Abdelmajid Tebboune, but they did not get democracy, and they did not get a more open society. Instead, they got more crackdowns. And what has been consistently happening is that the Tebboune regime uses counterterrorism laws to silence civil society, because they are particularly heavy laws. And also, once you frame somebody within the framework of being a terrorist and a threat to the state, it's a mechanism of turning people against these individuals and to create suspicion that actually they're working against the Algerian state rather than being upholders of human rights and civil rights.
So there've been recent armed clashes in Tripoli. Can you tell us a little bit more about what triggered this violence and what the situation is looking like at the moment? Is there calm? Is it holding?
It's calm and holding. When I saw videos of the Al Samud convoy going through Zaria, I was thinking, oh, is this going to go okay? Zaria is really one of the worst places in terms of security. We've seen sort of a number of the smaller armed groups clashing, particularly on Sunday. This all goes back to the assassination of Ghanewa, Al-Kikli a couple of weeks ago, which we discussed on the show. And although there was a peace and a truce, and in fact, Debeba organised this on National Security Council, which is bringing together disparate groups, so that we've seen the RADA, which was an ally of Al-Kikli's militia, coming together with the Mizraten 111 brigade. All the brigades have got numbers and names, and they anybody following Libya is following multiple different names and of brigades. And this is also with the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Interior. And that was an attempt for people to bury the hatchet rather than bury each other. But the tensions are such, because there's still not 100% consensus behind Prime Minister Debeba. There's still a real sort of fight for who's going to be top dog within the region. There is a lot of discomfort, and because Debeba, he's out of his mandate, he's not elected. There are a lot of people who are vying to try and see if he can be sort of pushed out of power, which was why Ghanewa was assassinated. He was very much the man to challenge Debeba at the time. So it's possible we're going to see these clashes kind of grind on. And an expert on Libya who covers Libya regularly and visits Libya regularly, he was saying that what he thinks is going to be the case is that the bigger militia are going to be sort of engaging in kind of an arms race, that things might be relatively quiet over the course of the year, and then we'll see a big explosion when people feel confident enough to win. Right. There's no single militia that is big enough and has enough firepower to win an outright war at the moment in Libya.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Who knew just how complicated things would become after Muammar Gaddafi? Elysia, we're going to have to leave it there. Always good talking to you, and we'll chat again next week. Have a lovely weekend.
Great, and enjoy your celebrations.
We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best.
Absolutely.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's one of our regular commentators, journalist, researcher and filmmaker Alicia Volkman, giving us some insights on the North Africa and Sahel region. It's time now for your news headlines as we say good morning once again to Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to visit flood-ravaged areas in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape today after rain led to floods which have left a trail of destruction in which 78 people have died. A police officer has been arrested in Kenya in connection with the murder of Albert Jwang, a social media blogger known for his posts on X and Facebook about political and social issues, was arrested for what police was called publishing false information. And family members have been gathering in the Indian city of Ahmedabad to give the authorities DNA samples to help identify the victims of Air India plane crash. I'll have more details at the top of the hour.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time now for the first sports catch-up as we say good morning to Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. Let's start off with what's happening at Lords. Another day on which the ball dominated the bed. South Africa's bowlers have given the Proteas an outside chance of winning the final of the ICC World Test Championship against Australia at Lords in London. 14 wickets tumbled on day 2, and at the close on day 2, Australia lead by 218 runs. But with only 2 seconds innings wickets in hand, South Africa, who resumed their first innings on 43 for the loss of 4 wickets yesterday morning, were bowled out for 138. David Bedingham top scored with 45, while Australian captain took 6 for 28 in 18 overs in 1 delivery. The defending champions started their second innings with a lead of 74 runs, but were pegged back by the Proteas fast bowlers. Australia will resume on 144 for 8 on day 3, and the match on knife's edge. Basketball news. BAL, Basketball Africa League, defending champions Pedro de Luanda pulled off a major upset when they defeated Egypt's Al Ittihad 96-74 in the first semi-final played at the Sunbet Arena in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria. This was Al Ittihad's first loss this season in the BAL, having reached the finals unbeaten until Wednesday. The Angolan champions, who had lost their opening playoffs game, will now face Al Ahly Tripoli from Libya in the final. Assistant coach George Elodey explains how they turned around the situation.
I think that we are very happy with the performance because we are thinking these days on the kind of game that we need to win, and we make all the things like we are thinking. All the days we are seeing skills of the team on video, and we need to defend this, and we defend the things that they are, for us is very important to win.
On to football news. Mamelodi Sundowns goalkeeper coach Kennedy Mueni has spoken about what he anticipates ahead of his first FIFA Club World Cup in the new role. Mueni jetted out to the USA for the World Cup. Sundowns took part in the old format 9 years ago while Mueni was still playing, and he's hoping for an improvement in America.
Look, there's a lot of memories. The first time I went there, I think it was 2016, and for us, by that time, it was the first time, and we went there when we won Champions League. We were going there in a different capacity as well as goalkeeper coach. I think it's very important. I think the team has been growing in leaps and bounds, and look, I think it's very important, even though that we have a couple of youngsters in our team, but it's important that we go there and compete, not just to participate here.
Mueni welcomed the expanded Club World Cup, arguing it gives Africa a fighting chance of winning on this global stage.
I think it's good for Africa because last time it was only maybe 2 teams or 1, but this time around it's about 4, which gives us a chance as Africa as well. Even though the number we're still crying about the number, but nevertheless, I think we just have to go and show our case that side. We know that it won't be easy. It's a high-profile tournament, and.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son de Aya, que je dédicace à vous tous, chers auditeurs, qui êtes en train de suivre cette émission Mix Vibration. N'oubliez pas, vous pouvez nous suivre à partir de l'application SABC+. Vous choisissez Channel Africa pour suivre l'émission en direct. Nous allons danser au son de Aya.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And on Rise and Shine, it's time to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of business, commerce, and at the helm today is Thabiso Lihoko. Good morning, Thabiso.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and a very good morning. Minister in the Presidency for Planning and Monitoring and Evaluation, Marubeni Ramokgopa, says for South Africa to mobilize resources domestically, it needs to deal with issues of tax evasion and impediments that affect financial flow. Ramokgopa was a keynote speaker at a G20 engagement hosted by the Sol Plaatje University in Kimberley in the Northern Cape Province. Civil society, government and academics gathered to reflect on the progress towards Vision 2030 and the National Development Plan. Ramokgopa raised concerns about government's inability to achieve most of its goals.
For us to be able to mobilize resources domestically, we need to deal with the issues of tax evasion and any other thing that addresses or is actually impacted by this illicit financial flow. We are also discussing the strengthening of making sure that the social protection or the protection of our social flows must then now be addressed as well.
The Red Meat Producers Organisation in South Africa's Northern Cape Province is holding its 2-day annual congress to discuss challenges faced by the farming sector, which include the impact of foot-and-mouth disease. The organisation says South Africa needs to develop its own vaccine production capabilities. The country has placed an urgent order for $4 million worth of foot-and-mouth disease vaccines to combat ongoing outbreaks in the KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng and Mpumalanga provinces, respectively. The decision comes as several key South African trading partners have temporarily suspended beef imports due to the outbreak. The Red Meat Producers Organization's chairperson, Brand de Doit, explains.
The problem with the vaccines is back and closer foot and mouth area. We are not self-sufficient in that field. We are importing the vaccines from Botswana, and a much more bigger country than Botswana. We must look in the eyes of our neighbors. That's a big concern, but the first vaccines is coming at the end of this month, and then we can start injections of the feedlots. But it is most concerned that we must import vaccines while our local industry cannot provide.
Meanwhile, Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, Wandile Sihlobo, says the current outbreak of foot-and-mouth and export bans will ultimately hit the farmers' pockets.
There are two things that needs to be done. It's an improvement on surveillance and the control of animals. The second aspect is about the investments we need to make on a vaccine manufacturing through OBP and the Agricultural Research Council. We cannot, as South Africa, depend perpetually on small countries like Botswana on importing vaccines.
Ugandan Finance Minister Matia Kasaija says that the country's economy will grow at least 7% in the fiscal year starting in July. He made this statement while delivering his budget speech earlier yesterday. Uganda is poised to start pumping crude oil next year, and the International Monetary Fund predicts the revenues from crude sales could lift its economic growth rate into double digits. The World Bank has said it is resuming funding to the country nearly 2 years after the global lender suspended new financing in response to an anti-LGBT law that imposes penalties including death and life imprisonment. British goods exports to the United States suffered a record fall in April after US President Donald Trump imposed new tariffs, pushing Britain's goods trade deficit to its widest in more than 3 years. Britain's Office for National Statistics says Britain exported $5.6 billion of goods to the United States in April, down from £6.1 billion in March, the lowest amount since February 2022 and the sharpest decline since monthly records began in 1997. The $2.7 billion fall contributed to a bigger-than-expected drop in British gross domestic product in April. The dollar in Nigeria will cost you 1,000 naira 536 Botswana 13.20 Kenya 128 shilling 413 and Zambia 24 kwacha 60. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 real 53. Russia 79 rubles 82, India 85 rupees 55, China 7 yuan 17, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 76. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold $3,442. Platinum $1,290 per ounce. Brent crude oil $78.06 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to discuss with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
It's time now for our G20 fact of the day. Did you know that the timing of South Africa's presidency is especially significant as Africa's role within the G20 is rapidly expanding? For the first time, an African nation will hold the presidency, marking a significant milestone. Now, additionally, the formal addition of the AU as a permanent member of the G20 is a development that has potential to carry substantial weight for the continent. And that is our G20 fact for the morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Bringing you the energy, news, vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The G20 Digital Economy Working Group will produce a final report on its priority areas that will be signed by all communications ministers of member states in September this year. And that's according to the Chief Director of Emerging Technologies in the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, Jeanette Murwane. Now, delegates from all 20 countries gathered in Polokwane, which is north of the northernmost province in South Africa, Limpopo. The three-day meeting, which started on Monday, discussed digital connectivity, the use of technology to deliver services, as well as artificial intelligence technology. Rudzani Chivase has more for us.
The G20 Digital Economy Working Group has been focusing on how different countries can use technology to improve their economies. They have been highlighting key areas in the priorities set by the presidency, including connectivity for inclusive digital development and how to use information communication technology to improve the lives of people in different communities. Delegates said the digital economy will enable people, including those in rural areas, to participate in digital technology transformation for a better future. It will also enable those in developing countries to use technology for activities such as receiving grants through cell phones and applying for IDs and passports online. Delegates are expected to produce a final report on all the priorities areas in from the Department of Communications and Digital Technology, Jeanette Murwane.
What we achieved between Monday and now is to unpack all these different areas and agree on the deliverables we want to achieve as a working group. And the ultimate outcome is today we are finalizing the ministerial declaration document, which is a document that will be signed by all the ICT ministers of the G20 member countries. We're planning to sign that document in Cape Town.
Chinese delegate Ninang Ping says her country will work with countries in Africa to help with digital connectivity.
Through of the insightful and valuable workshops and the reports presented by the presidency and knowledge partners, it really gets up the sense and perspective of the Africa's need, Africa's opportunities and challenges they're facing, and we are very happy to join hands with G20 members to continue our cooperation on digital economy, ICT development, and digital development to foster the SDGs.
The United Nations Development Programme's delegate Chandras Karan Raja says developing countries must exploit the full potential of the digital economy and artificial intelligence.
We heard a lot of capacity building in the discussions yesterday. There were best practices on how should the capacity be built, what are some of the frameworks, what are the do's and don'ts, whether it was digital public infrastructure that needs to be built with safeguards or it is equitable AI which needs to be governed. We heard a lot of these good practices which needs to be adopted.
The G20 Digital Economy Working Group meeting is part of a series of international meetings that South Africa is hosting ahead of the main G20 summit in November. A task team on artificial intelligence group is expected to start with their discussions on Thursday. Rosanne Chibase, SABC News, Polokwane.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
South Africa's Deputy Minister of Social Development, Hanif Hendricks, has commended the work of the What About the Boys initiative, a program that's aimed at positively shaping the future of young men. He was speaking at the launch of the State of the Boy Child 3-year Impact Report held at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Now, this initiative uses a combination of mentorship, edutainment, emotional intelligence training, and digital engagement to reach boys across the country. And it comes at a time when South Africa continues to battle high levels of gender-based violence and rising youth unemployment, challenges that are disproportionately affecting boys and young men. Channel Africa's Tuton Gobeni attended the launch and filed this report.
The What About the Boys is a Prime Stars-led national initiative in South Africa aimed at redefining masculinity and addressing gender-based violence, GBV, among boys, promoting emotional intelligence and responsible behavior. Since inception in 2022, the program has managed to reach 60,000 boys across townships and rural schools in the country. At the launch of the State of the Boy Child 3-year Impact Report held in the city of Johannesburg in the Gauteng province, Deputy Minister at the Department of Social Development, Hanif Hendricks, lauded the initiative's mentorship program.
Look, What About the Boys has been a project, that we were watching with a lot of interest, and they have now presented government with a 3-year impact, what they've achieved over the 3 years. And I must say I'm very impressed because they reached out to nearly 60,000 boys, and the highlight of their program for me is the mentorship aspect.
In response to the challenges of the high unemployment rate among the boys in the country, Hendrik says they're working on introducing a home garden project that will empower boys as young as 16 years of age.
Nearly 50% of our young boys are unemployed. So we are very concerned about them, and that's why the NDA, which is one of the structures of the Department of Social Development, are working very closely with the Office of the Deputy Minister to introduce 1 million home gardens. So we would like to give a home garden that costs about 300 Rand, but after harvesting, it's 3,000 Rand worth of cabbages and carrots and lettuce. So we want to start introducing that when the boys reach the age of 16 while they're at school. All they need is a 4x4 square meter plot, and we are going to assist them, teach them how to plant, how to water, how to fertilize, how to harvest. Then we also need to look at marketing with cooperatives, and we even hope that they get involved with spices.
Meanwhile, Executive Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Prime Stars, Martin Sweet, says the 3-year impact report indicates that the boys that enrolled in this program have since changed their attitudes, particularly towards their counterparts.
16% of boys are agreed that there are times when a woman deserves to be beaten. 30% believe that it's okay to hit a girlfriend or a wife if she refuses sex. 74% thought a man can have sex with his wife whenever he wants. That mindset has been changed amongst young boys and young men. They are understanding that respect for girls, that they can't treat girls just as sexual objects, that they must behave and respect them, and that they have a wider view of society to actually be allies in the fight against gender-based violence.
Furthermore, Sweet says they are hoping to expand this initiative to all corners of the Southern African nation by collaborating with the country's Department of Basic Education to include this program in the curriculum in the future.
Well, the first thing we want to do is embed the What About the Boys program into the school curriculum and the education department, so it can touch the lives of every boy in school. Secondly, we need to strengthen our mentorship and alumni networks. Thirdly, we need to launch an annual summit where we can bring more people to support our program. We want to build and create a second educational movie, What About the Boys 2, that will touch on some of the issues that we never reached or never managed to touch on in What About the Boys.
In the meantime, the drivers of What About the Boys initiative will continue with the program by encouraging boys to embrace qualities such as sensitivity, kindness, and accountability, which are often mischaracterized as weakness in conventional masculinity. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
And still in South Africa, as the country battles the grip of a bitter winter, the country's homeless population is increasingly exposed to life-threatening cold and extreme weather. Data from Statistics South Africa's 2022 census reveals that over 55,000 people are homeless, with nearly half concentrated in Gauteng province. Tshwane, the capital city, records the highest number, making up 18.1% of the total, and that's followed closely by Johannesburg with 15.6%. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Cape, flooding linked to winter storms has led to several fatalities. Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe visited the city of Tshwane, where he spoke to those living on the streets and bearing the brunt of the brutal cold.
The South African Weather Service has confirmed that a low pressure system is moving through the nation, affecting every province except Limpopo province. The system, which began impacting the Western Cape province on Saturday evening, has intensified, and bearing the brunt the most are the homeless who sleep in the streets without proper warmth and shelter. Emmanuel Mulema explains his ordeal during the cold snap, which includes harassments by authorities.
Oh, it was difficult. you have to sleep with the fire next to you as well, because of it was very cold. In the morning, even late afternoon still. With the fire, you have to have more firewood so that you can make fire until late, until good. Yeah, some sleep, some others don't sleep. They just sit until we look after each other. No one can take anything from us here while anyone is around here. Only the metropolis and police, those who take advantage of us.
And they came today, they took
every plastic that we use here. Yeah, every small shed they put it down.
A lady known as Lulast, who also left her home in Soshanguve, north of Pretoria, to live in the streets, resonates with Mlema. She says they survived the cold through burning tires and firewood overnight.
They came and they took everything, all our clothes, our blanket, and it's cold. They say, I don't know about the thing of DA, what. I don't know. Mara. In the night, we can sleep, we go and look out for, those ties.
Yeah.
Those ties that, we open fire and then we're sitting on the fire. And see, if you see like this, I'm gonna go and take 100 rand or 120. So if I'm staying in Lokshin, how much to go to Lokshin? Maybe I'm staying in Soshango, it's 30 rand or 35 rand to and from.
Emin Gracia is a homeless undocumented migrant from Zimbabwe.
For us to survive, it's not our will, it's the man above, God. Because we can think we are clever as humans, we can get all the jackets. People come give us jackets, but it's very cold. Sometimes you can wear the jacket and say, okay, I want to see. It's going to do me a favor. Let me take out the jacket, and you put the jacket aside. It's still the same, Mario, you sleep. You wear the jacket, it's still the same, you sleep. No, I say we don't survive with our thoughts.
He adds that as diverse as they are, the challenges are identical.
These guys are from Mpumalanga, from wherever. I'm from Zimbabwe. All of us, we are suffering. We are trying to make a living out of rubbish. And rubbish is like giving us something to survive. That's why these days you see crime is a little bit low. Because people are coming from prison, they ask us, guys, we always see when we are going to court. What's going on here? We tell them that, no. This box, example, you see that box there, this box, it's 1 rand.
Our conversation with the homeless in South Africa's capital, Pretoria, ended on a sad note with the information that one of their own was found frozen dead nearby.
They say they find somebody sleeping there. I don't know if the forensic has been there or what, but they find somebody sleeping like this. And then that guy, he said he stood like this to see, is this guy breathing or what? The person is just sleeping like this.
Someone died even today.
It's cold.
Yeah, but you see.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
It's 7 o'clock, which means it's the second hour of Rise and Shine right here on Channel Africa Radio, where we bring you the African perspective. My name is Peter Ndoro. We're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. And it's pretty cold here, but we are going to keep you updated. In this particular hour, there's one story that we're looking at in particular. The first batch of South African soldiers deployed on a SADC mission to the DRC are coming home today, and we'll be going there live with one of our reporters who's been following this story. And don't forget, www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can stream us live. Otherwise, you can catch us on our mobile app, SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and look for Channel Africa. Right now, though, it's time for your news as we say good morning once again to Nolutando Buthelezi, and I'll be followed by your sports headlines with Figile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. The first group of over 2,000 South African National Defence Force soldiers are expected back home from deployment in the eastern DRC today. The troops were sent 2 years ago on UN and SADC peace mission. The mission was withdrawn amid growing pressure after 19 SADC soldiers were killed in clashes between the DRC army and the M23 rebels. Defence Minister Angie Motshekga, along with the National Defence Command, will welcome the troops in Bloemfontein. A police officer has been arrested in Kenya in connection with the murder of Albert Ojwang, a social media blogger. Ojwang, known for his posts on X and Facebook about political and social issues, was arrested in Homa Bay for what police said was publishing false information about Deputy Police Chief. He died in police custody on Saturday. Pathologists confirmed that he sustained severe head injuries and suffered neck compression and multiple soft tissue trauma. Hundreds of angry protesters demonstrated in the capital, Nairobi, after police initially suggested that the death was a suicide. The demonstrators set vehicles alight and police fired tear gas to disperse them. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to visit flood-ravaged areas in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape today. Heavy rain has led to the floods, which have left a trail of destruction in which 78 people have died. Cooperative Governance Minister Velenkosi Hlabisa and Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane will accompany Ramaphosa. They will interact with the affected communities in Dikoloni and Slovo Park, as well as visit the Jumba Senior Secondary School, which has lost some learners. Ramaphosa says that he is extremely concerned about the situation in the province.
The Eastern Cape is suffering from the floods. I will be going there to go and see exactly how our people are suffering, how we can console the families, and how we can come up with assistant measures from a disaster point of view to give real support to ordinary people, those who have suffered this loss, and we pay our condolences to those families that have lost their loved ones.
Zambia's former president Edgar Lungu, who died last week, left instructions that his successor Hakainde Hichilema should not be anywhere near his body. This is the latest development in the bitter feud over funeral plans for the late president following his death in South Africa at the age of 68. Elizabeth Mapari reports.
The government had planned to fly his body back home on Wednesday, but failed to do so because of a dispute with Lungu's family and his political party, the Patriotic Front, over mourning and funeral arrangements. The two leaders had been long-standing political rivals, with Hichilema defeating Lungu in the 2021 election after failing in 5 previous attempts. The PEF alleged that Lungu was banned from leaving the country for years and that if he had been allowed to travel to seek medical treatment sooner, he might still be alive. The government has denied the allegation. It says it wants to give Lungu, who led Zambia from 2015 to 2021, a state funeral.
Family members have been gathered in the Indian city of Ahmedabad to give the authorities DNA samples to help identify the victims of Air India plane crash. All but one of the 242 people on board a London-bound flight died when a Dreamliner 787 hit into a hospital complex. The BBC's Arunodaya Mukherjee reports.
Whoever we speak to, they can't believe what happened, especially the way they described what they saw, what they heard, this loud explosion, someone describing it like an earthquake, someone saying it sounded like a bomb went off, and then they see this plume of black smoke go up in a residential area, a plane's wing lying on the ground, the big engine jammed inside the building. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Suddenly you have fragments of a massive aircraft right in the middle of a road, smoke everywhere, fire everywhere. They just didn't know what was happening.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Our sports headline: the COSAFA Cup defending champions Angola will meet Madagascar, and the host South Africa will face Comoros in the semi-finals today. And JJ Spawn seizes the USA Open lead as Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy struggle. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, it's a significant moment for South Africa's military mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is unfolding today. The first group of South Africa's National Defence Force troops deployed under the Southern African Development Community Mission in the DRC, also known as SAMI DRC, are coming home. Yeah, they're expected to land at Air Force Base Bloemspruit in Bloemfontein today, where Defence and Military Veterans Minister the Military Veterans Minister will be officially welcoming them back a little bit later today. The soldiers have spent several months supporting efforts to stabilize the conflict-ridden eastern DRC, where violent clashes between rebel groups and government forces have intensified in recent years. For more on what's happening on the ground, we're now joined by Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe, who's stationed at the airbase in Bloemfontein. Michael, thanks very much indeed for joining us. You arrived there last night. Has there been any official briefing so far? And what's the atmosphere like this morning? I suspect it's a bit chilly.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to our listeners who are joining us from elsewhere in the globe. Peter, yes, we arrived here yesterday at around 10 p.m., but we experienced a challenge with the logistics as far as the accommodation is concerned. So previously, last week, 2 weeks back, where the NDF hosted the UN peacekeeping commemorations, the media team was stationed at this other hotel. So to find that when we came yesterday, it was full. So we had to move to another alternative hotel. When we arrived there, we checked in, but to find that the facilities, when we checked into our rooms, were not conducive to, according to the standards. So it was a big ordeal with, some commanders there trying to speak to the person who was in charge at that particular time in the evening last night. The lady who we were trying just to ask her to refund us the money because the trip is sponsored by the SNDF themselves. So she was refusing, saying that my manager, I can't get hold of my manager now. So we're saying that, how come you're running a business without a manager? And then, this business is a 24-hour business whereby a customer can just pop in anything, or maybe a problem might just arise any time. So moving on forward, we argued and argued and argued. So until the police came, we explained to the police the situation. And believe you me, Peter, it was freezing where we were. We stood there up to until 2 a.m. this morning.
Wow.
When I was like putting my head on the pillow, it was 3 a.m. this morning, just to, and we were frozen. Even in the room that I am, the air cons are not working. This makeshift hotel that we now checked in just to say, guys, there's no time. Our schedule is going to be very, very, tight in the morning. So let's just get somewhere we can just put our heads down, and then everybody should be motivated to cover this very important story, because we are here not for ourselves, but it's for the interest of the nation. So fast forward, we are here today now. We'll be leaving this morning at 7:20 to now heading to the military base. We haven't yet been there. So yeah, everyone is eager and welcome back to welcome back the soldiers. We haven't yet engaged with the community because as you know, we arrived very late in the night. So that's one of the ordeals that we experienced, but it's one of those, Peter, in this field you must expect, as such to happen. So that's what I was also telling my colleagues, that that's what you go through in this field. It's a calling. If you are not prepared, it's not for you, Peter.
It sometimes feels like a soldier's life being a journalist, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Who's expected at this return? Is Defence Minister Angie Motshekga going to be there?
Indeed, Peter. So according to the program, I said it's been a very difficult journey, Peter, a very sensitive one. That's why also you would see that the communication that is sent from the SNDF as far as this matter is concerned, it's a sudden. That's why even for me to be here, I was going to another story, the U20, but because of the importance of this matter, I have to drop that story and then make a U-turn back to Johannesburg and then prepare to travel here. It tells you how important this matter is. And Peter, we have engaged, you and me, in many instances where we've been covering this story. So it's been a very sensitive matter where for you also to get the information from the authorities, it's been very difficult and tight. Even today, we don't know whether we're going to be allowed to speak to the soldiers that are coming, because according to the program, let me just take you through, Peter, certainly that today's program is quite structured. The Military Command Council will arrive at around 10, followed by the escorted, where they will be escorted into the base at 10:30. So the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans will arrive at 11. The aircraft carrying the troops is scheduled to land at Air Force Base Bloomsbury at 12 midday this afternoon, Peter. And then shortly after that, the Minister and her entourage will meet and welcome the troops. By 12:30, everyone will move to the 44 Parachute Regiment at Tempe Military Base, where the Minister will be officially welcomed by the Chief of the South African Army and will inspect the facilities. So the event culminates with a media briefing at 14 hours, where the 14 hours Central Africa time, where the Minister will address the press and take questions. So it's a day focused on honoring the service and dedication of our soldiers while updating the public on their safe return as well, Peter. So going back to how this whole thing, came together, Peter, Goma was besieged where these soldiers were stationed. And when they surrendered, when they raised their white flag to say, no, we are not here to engage, suddenly they were surrendered. And then some of them, as you know, we've been reporting that some of them were not in a very good condition as far as their health is concerned. Some of them were very injured. And then the issue now was how will they now try, because Goma Airport was it's up to so far is non-operational. How would they be flown back to South Africa? And then there's an issue now where South Africa had issues with Rwanda, and the only way for them to reach South Africa is to go through Rwanda by road. So there were a lot of engagements at a bilateral level, Peter, between South Africa, the DRC government, and then also South Africa, the Rwandan authorities to pave a way, like a passage for these soldiers to pass through with their equipment. So it's been a very daunting, exercise and challenge by the defense. But finally, this is now it marks now the first phase of this operation, because according to how they've structured it, it will be through the phases. So they will be flown now. They traveled through Rwanda to Tanzania, and then from Tanzania, because the airports are operational, they'll be flown to South Africa today, Peter.
All right. I mean, I guess you're still trying to dig up and find out things, but do we know if there's any kind of debriefing process that these soldiers will undergo now that they're back home?
Normally, when we were traveling with them, I remember when we went to the Beit Bridge border post earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken, or was it last year? But nevertheless, there's always brief you to take you through on the proceedings. But like I said, Even yesterday, I tried just to, I was trying to get to engage with Colonel Shabalala to say, in a sound bite, Peter, we love stories. So I approached him. So he said, at the moment, no, we are not able to divulge any information. We will send the program on the group and just follow that program. That's how things are going to be. So I think after that, there is going to be a huge ceremony at the end of all these phases. Where now it's going to be now. I think I'm just suspecting that the Commander-in-Chief, President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think is going to officiate the main ceremony of welcoming the soldiers, like he did with the ones that. Let us also not forget that South Africa lost 14 soldiers in this mission of DRIC, Peter.
Okay, Michael, we're going to leave it there. So sorry about your ordeal, but safe travels back home.
It's much better than what we also experienced in Rwanda, Peter. We had to walk through mountains, but like I said, we'll soldier on. It's going to be a long day, but yeah, we will recover suddenly.
Thank you so much for fighting the good fight for us.
Much appreciated, Peter.
Thanks so much. That's our reporter, Michael Mbewe, in Bloemfontein, welcoming soldiers that were on that SADC mission in Eastern DRC.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Tensions are running high in Kenya following the death in police custody of a political blogger, Albert Ojwang, whose online commentary often challenged the state institutions and highlighted issues of governance and police brutality. Well, his death has sparked a public outcry and violent protests in parts of Nairobi, with demonstrators setting vehicles alight and clashing with security forces. A police constable has reportedly been arrested in connection with Ojwang's death, raising fresh concerns about accountability within Kenya's law enforcement agencies. Well, for the latest, we're now joined by our correspondent in Nairobi, Alex Kiari. Alex, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everyone.
So, can you confirm whether a police officer has indeed been arrested in connection with Albert Ojwang's death, and what evidence has reportedly linked him to the case?
This information was contained in a social media report that was sent by the police yesterday evening, quite late, around 10 p.m. local time. And it linked a police constable by the name James Mukhwana, who was attached to the central police station where Ojwang allegedly was killed. And it says that he was the one responsible, or rather the main suspect behind the killing of the blogger. But they have not released more information about rather linking him to that act. Although many of the social media users and activists claim that this constable could just be a sacrificial lamb to the whole saga, because they claim that the person who should be of interest in this issue should be the Deputy Inspector General of Police, whose name is Eliud Lagat. Peter.
Why is the Deputy Commissioner's name coming up? Was he present? Was it his instructions? Why would they be targeting him?
The Deputy Inspector General of Police is the person whose name was allegedly tarnished by a social media post which linked him to corruption allegations and said that he was collecting up to over $770,000 every month in bribes. And he is actually the one who has been confirmed to have lodged the complaint. And it is said that he could be the person who had sent the criminal investigation agencies to arrest the blogger in a place called Homa Bay, over 350 kilometers western Kenya, and later transported to Nairobi, where he arrived and was said to have been injured along the way. And it is actually also being said that, or alleged that the officers who were interdicted recently over the killing of Ojwang could actually have been innocent, and the Central Police station head says that he actually received an injured Ojwang, and he has been actually posting on social media indicating that he will not be willing to go down alone since he, as he says, is innocent. So it was actually ordered, allegedly ordered that Ojwang be arrested by the criminal investigation agencies for the social media post, and it is said that it was actually on the orders of Lagat.
And the police have been forced to backtrack their original story. I mean, they had a different version about how Ojwang died, didn't they?
Yes, actually, the Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, has since apologized over that. And he says that several officers have been summoned by the police oversight body. And he also added that this actually could have happened outside the police station where Ojwang is allegedly said to have been killed. So clearly there could be some deeper issues that are aggravating the whole situation here. And as IPOA goes into investigating the whole issue, it is also emerging that after the blogger was killed, some officers from the National Police headquarters arrived at the police station and took away hard disks from the CCTV cameras. And later on, as the chairman of IPOA says, these disks were formatted to hide or rather conceal the evidence over the issue of the killing of Ojwang. Peter?
What has the president said about this? I mean, the police are continually being accused of excessive force. And here we're seeing somebody dying in police detention. Initially, they lie about what's happened, covering up evidence, it seems like. What has the president said?
The president actually spoke about this thing on Wednesday and said that all police officers who are involved in this kind of killing are rogue elements within the force. But still, activists allege that he could actually be complicit because these killings could be happening in the name of defending his regime. And also, they're also reading something different. They say that that statement is colors. It's not really capturing the mood and the situation. He is said to have just spoken about this thing to get his name out of it. But the whole blame is being laid on his government regime, owing to the fact that abductions have been happening and he's not been talking about it, and that some politicians have been defending police even following this recent human rights violations that have been happening in the country, including the recent killing of Ojwang.
How have the public and political leaders been responding to the news of this death? Are we seeing broader outrage beyond Nairobi?
Actually, it is more countrywide and almost going regional, but since the inclusion of the opposition leader Raila Odinga into the broad-based government, some politicians allied to his party seem to be more soft on the government, calling for the investigations to be allowed to continue without these protests. But activists have really been very, very, very hard on the government. Protesters and even those politicians allied to the former deputy president Rigathi Gachagua have also been going really hard on the government and calling out the president and his recent political friend Raila Odinga of engendering violence against activism and opposition leaders. So it is quite divided here and there.
Take us through the yesterday's protests. What actually unfolded, and what kind of disruption did they cause?
Massive traffic jams, business disruptions, and all activities within the city center were disrupted. Running battles between police and protesters, tear gas canisters, and actually, it is said that one food vendor was yesterday injured by live bullet, and she's now receiving treatment at the International Hospital. But so far, it was unprecedented in the recent times. Many people did not expect protesters to come out in large numbers, and this in itself is setting pace to this first anniversary of the 2024 protests, June 2024 protests that happened last year. And it is actually expected that this could be setting pace to a bigger protest that is coming up in the next maybe 2 weeks or so. And this could actually aggravate the situation, because remember that the protests yesterday were about the killing of Ojwang. Yet it is also the same time that the budget was being read, and many have actually raised concern about the details in the budget, about the tax proposals, and also the expected high cost of living that is supposed to be actually aggravated by the whole budget that is being proposed by the state. So we could be anticipating more protests maybe in the coming days. But going into the weekend, we have not seen any plans of similar protests, because usually these protests are usually planned online, and we are not seeing any posters doing rounds on the expected protests over the weekend. But this could definitely be setting pace to more protests that are expected in the coming days. And the fact that huge numbers of protesters came out yesterday shows that the fear is gone. No more violence is going to prevent people from coming out in the streets to protest for their rights.
Fearless, you say. We heard reports that vehicles were being torched and police firing tear gas. Was anybody arrested in the process by the police?
Yes, several protesters were arrested yesterday, but there's something interesting about that the torching of vehicles. According to the social media investigators, the two vehicles that were burned were actually could have been planted there by security agencies, because the registration numbers of the two cars that were set ablaze yesterday are not matching what the car models that were torched. According to the posts, the two Toyota cars that were burnt yesterday is now emerging that they are not actually cars that are supposed to be in the system. The first saloon car, Toyota, has its registration number linked to an Isuzu truck, and then the second station wagon Toyota vehicle is actually being linked. The registration is being linked to a Toyota van. Both cars are not actually in the system because they are said to have been removed from the system after being declared a write-off in road accidents. So there could be some foul play in the whole thing, and it could actually be linked to politicians allied to the government or the state itself having planted the vehicles and set them ablaze to make the protests look like they are not as genuine as they are. They're more destructive, as unlike how it was being portrayed as peaceful protests. So there's some politics and back and forth about the whole thing. So we wanted to see how it will all play out as more revelations come out, Peter.
So Ojwang operated mostly online. What's been the reaction on social media? And are there other activists now increasing the volume in defiance?
Actually, after the protest yesterday, the social media bloggers actually became more pronounced and more aggressive. And as we anticipate for more protests in the coming days, it is going to build up in the social media platforms, especially X. And more voices are now emerging with more evidence linking the police to the recent abductions, to the killing of activists, and especially with Ojwang. More evidence is coming out, as it is now emerging that actually the person who had made that offensive post had actually been arrested and put to trial on the same. But now it clearly seems that the police are doing what they are not supposed to see. Remember that, as I said earlier, social media posts and all matters to do with defamation are not handled by criminal justice agencies, but they're supposed to be handled by the civil courts. And like now, we're seeing now police getting more and more involved in arresting people who are said to be posting offensive posts. But now, this, as it is under the law of Kenya, when one is offended or feel defamed by any social media post, they're supposed to go to the courts and lodge complaints and compel the posters or the writers or the journalists or the people behind these posts to either give evidence or be fined. But now, when the police are involved, then clearly it shows that there could be some issues that are not being handled as they are supposed to be legally. So the protests online are surging, and this is what now is going to be used to build up for more protests to come in the coming days, mostly around 13 or 14 days to come.
Alex, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much indeed for that update.
Thank you very much, Peter, and all the rest.
Thank you. That's our correspondent in Nairobi, Alex Kiari, giving us an update on the situation following the death of this online blogger, Ojwang, who died in police custody. And the people are just not having it. And there have been protests, and it looks like this might end up being mixed with the response to the Kenyan budget. We'll be watching developments in Kenya for you. It's time now for your news headlines. Here's Nolutando Butalezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
The first group of over 2,000 South African National Defence Force soldiers are expected back home from deployment in the eastern DRC today. The troops were sent 2 years ago on UN and SADC peace missions. A police officer has been arrested in Kenya in connection with the murder of Albert Ojwang, a social media blogger. Ojwang, known for his posts on X and Facebook about political and social issues, was arrested for what police said was publishing of false information. And the UN says that the telecommunications blackout in Gaza is paralyzing humanitarian operations. The deputy UN spokesperson says that heavy military activity has damaged the last fiber optic cables servicing the territory. I'll have this at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And it's time for your sports now. Good morning, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning once again, Peter. We begin with football news. The semi-finals of the 2025 COSAFA Cup will take place today. Defending champions Angola will meet Madagascar, and host South Africa will face Comoros after the semi-final lineup was completed at the COSAFA Cup. The first semi-final will see with Angola up against Madagascar, locking up at 1500 hours Central African time, and South Africa clashing with Comoros at 1800 hours Central African time. Both games are at the Free State Stadium in South Africa's Free State Province. And David Bedingham says the Proteas are very excited about the opportunity to break the ICC trophy drought ahead of what could be a pivotal third day of the World Test Championship final at Lord's. Bedingham top scored in his team's first innings with 45 out of a paltry total of 138 all out to concede a lead of 74 following Australia's 212 on the first day. The Proteas came roaring back into the contest, though, as they reduced Australia to 144 for 8 at Stamps on day 2, an overall lead of 218 runs. Bedingham believes they have what it takes to pull off a successful run chase and win a first ICC trophy in 27 years.
Lungi's a chilled guy, so I don't think it would have affected him that much. But yeah, I think he was struggling with that end, and I think as soon as he changed ends, he looked a lot more comfortable. And for him to bowl 9 overs on the bounce takes a massive amount of effort. I think we're very lucky to have him.
And now in athletics, the Kenyan runner Faith Cherotich is making waves in the world of steeplechase, recently shattering the Oslo Diamond League meet record with a time of 9 minutes, 02.60 seconds on Thursday. This impressive win saw her outpace Olympic champion Winfred Yavi for the second time in a row. Cherotich, who previously earned a bronze at the 2023 World Championship, is now a strong favorite for the gold medal at the upcoming World Athletics Championships in Tokyo, carrying the hopes of a running proud nation. The Oslo Diamond League, known as the Bislett Games, is a big deal in athletics. Since 1965, it's been a stage for legends and record breakers, and Cherotich added her name to that list. And golf news, it is JJ Spawn, US golfer, who set the clubhouse target with a stunning 4 under 66, where he carried the only bogey-free round of the day and equaled the best start to a US Open at Oakmont Country Club. Bryson DeChambeau and Rory McIlroy made slow starts to their title challenges, while Spawn continued his career-changing season by grabbing a history-making lead. A 34-year-old American equaled the lowest first round of any US Open at Oakmont, a 66 by American Andrew Laundrie in 2016, producing only the 8th bogey-free US Open round at the Pennsylvania Club, hosting for a record 10th time. Spawn has never posted a top 20 finish in a major and is without a PGA Tour title since the 2022 Vallejo, Texas Open. His only victory to date, although he has jumped from outside the World 100 to inside the top 25 after an impressive start to the season. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lengwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son de Haya, que je dédicace à vous tous, chers auditeurs, qui êtes en train de suivre cette émission Mix Vibration. N'oubliez pas, vous pouvez nous suivre à partir de l'application SABC+. Vous choisissez Channel Africa pour suivre l'émission en direct. Nous allons danser au son de Haya.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And it's time now to find out what's been happening in the world of business and economics. Tabiso Luko, good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good morning. South Africa's Statistician General, Risenga Maluleke, has called on Capitec Chief Executive Officer Harry Fourie to publicly present his method of determining the country's unemployment rate. This after Fourie questioned Statistics South Africa's employment figures. He's argued that the country's unemployment data excludes those employed in the informal sector. Fourie also says if individuals were to be added, then the country's unemployment rate would be close to 10%. Maluleke says Statistics SA's data is beyond reproach.
About 3 weeks ago, I released the quarterly labor force survey. We have reported on the informal sector, and I said the number of people in the informal sector are 3.3 million, and they account for about 19.9% of all people employed in South Africa.
South Africa's Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, says the government has set aside $863 million for the procurement of vaccines to help stop the spread of foot-and-mouth disease. Steenhuisen was speaking at the Red Meat Arbiter Association's 31st Congress in Somerset West, outside Cape Town yesterday. He says 900,000 of the vaccines are set to be rolled out this month.
Well, the rollout will start as soon as the vaccines arrive from Botswana. We procure foot-and-mouth vaccines from the Botswana Vaccine Institute because we don't produce locally, although that is something that's being worked on by the Agricultural Research Council. And we hope to, in the short to medium term, be able to have our own vaccine here in South Africa.
Economists say Kenya has a spending problem that has seen the government spending nearly a third of the country's budget on debt repayment and public wage bill. President William Ruto's administration has been struggling to narrow the fiscal deficit and is seeking new sources of funding to avoid tax hikes and austerity measures that saw countrywide protests last year. Kenya's Finance Minister John Mbadi.
We face the challenges of mobilizing higher tax revenues as we must balance the need for increased revenues with the need to keep the cost of doing business low to stimulate economic growth.
Ugandan Finance Minister Matia Kasaija says that the country's economy will grow at least 7% in the fiscal year starting in July. He made the statement while delivering his budget speech earlier yesterday. Uganda is poised to start pumping crude oil next year, and the International Monetary Fund predicts revenue from crude sales could lift its economic growth into double digits. The World Bank has said it is resuming funding to the country nearly 2 years after the global lender suspended new financing in response to an anti-LGBT law that imposes penalties including death and life imprisonment. U.S. stock futures fell more than 1%, oil prices jumped and U.S. treasuries rose. This follows Israel's bombardment of Iran. The U.S. dollar, Japanese yen and Swiss franc rallied as Iranian media said explosions were also heard in Tehran as tensions mounted over U.S. efforts to win Iran's agreement to halt production of material for an atomic bomb. 2 U.S. officials who spoke on condition of anonymity said there was no U.S. assistance or involvement in the operation. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 536 Botswana, 13 pula 20 Kenya, 128 shilling 413 and Zambia 24 kwacha 60. The BRICS countries and Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 real 53. Russia, 79 rubles 82. India, 85 rupees 55. China, 7 yuan 76. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 76. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities markets now. Gold is $3,442 and platinum $1,290 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $78.06 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Tabiso, thanks very much indeed. He'll be back in about an hour with another business news update. Talking about business and economics news, let's go to Kenya now, where economists say that Kenya has a spending problem that's seen the government spending nearly a third of the country's budget on debt repayment and the public wage bill. President William Ruto's administration has been struggling to narrow the fiscal deficit and is seeking new sources of funding to avoid tax hikes and austerity measures that saw countrywide protests last year. Dimakatso Lishuro filed this report.
With an overall budget of $33 billion and a fiscal deficit of 4.8% of GDP for the fiscal year 2025-2026, Kenya faces a mammoth task of balancing the constitutional spending requirements and a ballooning wage bill that's crowding out other spending items. $10 billion of the $33 billion will go towards interest on debt and public servant salaries, while $5.4 billion will go towards infrastructure, and only $12 billion will go towards expenditure for the financial year that will start on July 1st. Kenya's Finance Minister John Mbadi says the government has made tough choices given existing fiscal constraints.
We face the challenges of mobilizing higher tax revenues as we must balance the need for increased revenues with the need to keep the cost of doing business low to stimulate economic growth. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, These constraints are interlinked, and addressing them effectively requires strategic planning, fiscal discipline, and a commitment to long-term sustainability. In this regard, this budget will continue to implement a fiscal consolidation plan designed towards slowing down the growth of public debt while protecting service delivery to our citizens. Given the limited resources, we have made tough choices by curtailing funding to lower priority areas. This has allowed us to redirect our scarce resources towards the better core pillars and enablers, accelerating outcomes for citizens while maintaining pro-poor spending in health, education, and vulnerable groups.
He says economic growth will reach 5.3% this year and in 2026.
The economy is expected to sustain growth momentum in 2025 and 2026, with the growth projected at 5.3% per year. And Mr. Speaker, this growth outlook is premised on a stable macroeconomic environment over the medium term. To foster macroeconomic stability, the government will continue to uphold prudent monetary and fiscal policies, ensuring that our actions remain aligned with the evolving needs of the economy and of the Kenyan people. As part of the process, the government will work to ensure that inflation remains within the targeted range, maintain a competitive exchange rate to the dollar, and deliver stable interest rates.
Tax consultant and lecturer in Kenya, Dr. Alex Kamau, says while the budget seemed to propose measures to reduce the fiscal deficit, it's unrealistic and does not comply with Kenya's constitution.
The budget does not comply with the provisions of the Constitution of Kenya, where it says that budget being allocated for development expenditure should not be less than 30% of the total budget. So what we have right now is the budget going to the development expenditure being at 28% of the total budget. And the challenge we also have with that is that the revenue targets that the government is working for or with is very aggressive, something that may not be realistic.
Kamau says the constitutional amendments of 2010 resulted in a bloated government taking a big share of the limited budget.
We came up with 47 governors, we came up with 47 senators, we came up with 47 women rep, and many other offices that were created as a result of the new constitution. So basically in Kenya, we are overrepresented by leaders, by political leaders. And therefore, from that time is when we see the wage bill taking a huge chunk of the entire bill. Because as we speak right now, the wage bill is 1.2 trillion, when the KRA is actually expecting to, KRA is Kenya Revenue Authority, the authority is expecting to collect about 2.4 trillion, only for 50% of that taxes to be paid to 1 million of the people who are employed by the government. So the problem is the expenditure side.
He added that the financial system is hindering the growth of the middle class. Many Kenyans are not happy with the current economic conditions, says Nyasha Mbani, an analyst at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa.
The Kenyan government must address the deep mistrust in the tax system, which Kenyans view as unfair and poorly managed. Many citizens believe that taxes are too high and are not being used efficiently and are not linked to improved public services. And this mistrust makes it difficult to mobilize domestic resources without public backlash.
While Mbadi presented the budget, protests intensified in the capital Nairobi after the death in custody of a political blogger. Police fired tear gas at protesters after vehicles were set alight. For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro.
Let's move further afield now. It's being reported that the United States is discouraging other governments from attending next week's high-level United Nations conference on reinvigorating the two-state solution between Palestinians and Israelis. The news agency cites a U.S. diplomatic cable sent earlier this week And in the cable, the US warns that countries taking anti-Israel actions after the conference will be viewed as acting in opposition to US foreign policy interests, and possible diplomatic consequences may happen from Washington. This comes as the United States is evacuating non-essential staff and families from certain missions and military bases in the region. This all amidst an apparent deadlock in nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran in terms of advancements in Tehran's nuclear program. Sharon Bryce-Beese picks up the story from us and talks to us about these and other developments from New York.
The two-state solution conference is being co-hosted by close US allies France and Saudi Arabia to chart an action-oriented, irreversible path towards a comprehensive and lasting peace between Israel and Palestine on the two-state formula. The meeting, which runs from June 17th through the 20th, will include thematic roundtables on key issues, including security for both sides, humanitarian reconstruction, and the economic viability of a Palestinian state. South Africa will be represented by Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola.
Can you confirm that the president is no longer supporting a two-state solution?
The White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt was asked if President Trump no longer supported a two-state solution after U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee indicated that Washington was no longer pursuing the goal of an independent Palestinian state.
Right now, the president views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. And the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in this region of the world. And that's why the president has said the number one focus and priority of the administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. The administration is still pushing very hard for the release of all the hostages. And as for what happens next, clearly Gaza is an uninhabitable place. It needs to be rebuilt with the help of our Arab partners, and the president wants to see that happen as well.
UN spokesperson Farhan Haq asked for his reaction to the US cable.
I believe that all the member states of the system will make their own decisions accordingly to what their own interests are. But we expect that there will be a widespread attendance at this meeting.
This was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres a week earlier.
My message to world leaders and delegations is that it is absolutely essential to keep alive the two-state solution perspective with all the terrible things we are witnessing in Gaza and in the West Bank. And for those that doubt about the two-state solutions, I ask, what is the alternative? Is it a one-state solution in which either the Palestinians are expelled or the Palestinians will be forced to live in their land without rights? That would be totally unacceptable. I firmly believe that it is the duty of the international community to do everything to keep the two-state solution alive and then to materialize the conditions to make it happen.
The US posture comes in a broader context of solidarity with Israel, including imposing sanctions on judges of the International Criminal Court over warrants issued against Israeli leaders over alleged war crimes in Gaza, and Washington's condemnation of sanctions imposed by the United Kingdom, Canada, Norway, New Zealand and Australia on two sitting right-wing Israeli cabinet ministers for undermining the two-state solution. Listen to UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
These two individuals, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, have been inciting violence against Palestinian people for months and months and months. They have been encouraging egregious abuses of human rights. We have been raising this with the Israeli government, both privately and publicly, and alongside our partners, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Norway. Today we are announcing sanctions against those individuals because we have been absolutely clear. This has to stop, and we stand for a two-state solution.
In addition to these developments, the United States is evacuating non-essential staff from its embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, while the Pentagon will allow military dependents to leave locations around the Middle East due to a heightened risk in the region. Journalists asked President Trump about this development.
We're hearing reports that U.S. personnel are being moved out of the region within striking distance.
Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But we've given notice to move out, and we'll see what happens.
Is there anything that could be done to dial the temperature down in the region?
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple.
President Trump also indicated this week that he was growing less confident that Tehran would agree to stop enriching uranium as part of a new US-led negotiation over Iran's nuclear program, which could lead to sanctions relief. Iran has long stated that it does not seek to develop a nuclear weapon, and its defense minister Aziz Nazirzadeh told reporters Wednesday that were Iran to be subjected to strikes, it would retaliate by hitting US bases in the region. CBS News reports that US officials had been told that Israel was fully ready to launch an operation into Iran, and that Iran could retaliate against certain American sites in the region. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in New York.
One Briton is believed to have survived after a plane carrying 242 people crashed shortly after takeoff in the northwestern Indian city of Ahmedabad. That's according to local police. 53 Britons were on board the Boeing Air India flight bound for London. Here's more from Laura Westbrook.
In a statement, London Gatwick Airport said the flight was due to land at 6:25 p.m. UK time on Thursday. A reception centre for relatives for those on board has been set up where information and support is being provided, according to Gatwick Airport. Now, this was a fairly popular route, getting people from London to Gujarat in India, with around 5 flights a week. Air India's UK operations are in Birmingham, Gatwick and Heathrow, operating a number of routes to Indian cities. Now, among the 242 people on board, there were 169 Indian nationals and 53 Britons, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian, according to Air India. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said images emerging of the crash were devastating. He said he's also being kept informed as the situation is developing, and tributes have been pouring in, including from King Charles and Queen Camilla, who say they are desperately shocked by the crash, and their prayers and deepest possible sympathy are with family and friends of those affected. Laura Westbrook, SABC News, London.
All right, very tragic story there playing out in India. We'll keep on top of that particular story for you. We're coming towards the top of the hour, and in the next hour, I'm going to be having a fascinating conversation with a lawyer, human rights activist. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly, but today in history, a lot of things were happening. On Monday, here in South Africa, is an event that's commemorated in South Africa, June 16 Uprising. Soweto Uprising is officially known. What happened was, in fact, in the days leading up to it, including June the 13th, today, there was a lot of tension, rising tension, student mobilization, underground planning, and students were protesting against the enforcement of the Afrikaans language as a medium of instruction in schools. June 13 marks a critical moment in the build-up to that youth-led resistance that will become a turning point in South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. So on Monday, we'll tell you a little bit more about that. But June 13 and the days before, a lot of mobilization was taking place. The students were getting ready for this march, and they had no idea what was going to unfold on the Monday, that police would kill school children. But as I said, we'll have more on that on Monday. Coming up on the program this next half hour, I'll be talking to celebrated Kenyan lawyer, human rights activist and politician Martha Karua about what's happening in her country and some of her own story. That's all coming up in the next 30 minutes. Right now, though, it's 8 o'clock, which means it's time for your news with Nolutando Buthelezi, and that's going to be followed with your sports headlines. And at the sports desk today is Fikile Lingwati, and you can imagine ahead of a weekend there's lots of sports on the horizon, including will South Africa do it on the cricket field? Let's begin with the news.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning. The first group of over 2,000 South African National Defence Force soldiers are expected back home from deployment in the eastern DRC today. The troops were sent 2 years ago on UN and SADC peace mission. The mission was withdrawn amid growing pressure after 19 SADC soldiers were killed in clashes between the DRC army and the M23 rebels. Defence Minister Angie Motshekga, along with the National Defence Command, will welcome the troops in Bloemfontein. President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to visit flood-ravaged areas in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape today. Heavy rain led to floods which have left a trail of destruction in which 78 people have died. Cooperative Governance Minister Velenkosi Hlabisa and the Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane will accompany Ramaphosa. They will interact with the affected communities and in Slovo Park, as well as visit the Jumba Senior Secondary School, which has lost some learners. Ramaphosa says that he is extremely concerned about the situation in the province.
The Eastern Cape is suffering from the floods. I will be going there to go and see exactly how our people are suffering, how we can console the families, and how we can come up with assistant measures from a disaster point of view to give real support to ordinary people, those who have suffered this loss, and we pay our condolences to those families that have lost their loved ones.
A police officer has been arrested in Kenya in connection with the murder of Albert Ojwang, a social media blogger. Ojwang, known for his posts on X and Facebook about political and social issues, was arrested in Homa Bay for what police said was publishing false information about the deputy police chief. He died in police custody on Saturday. Pathologists confirmed that he sustained severe head injuries and suffered neck compression and multiple soft tissue trauma. Hundreds of angry protesters demonstrated in the capital, Nairobi, after police initially suggested that the death was a suicide. The demonstrators set vehicles alight and police fired tear gas to disperse them. Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema is forbidden to be anywhere near his predecessor's body at Galungu. The former president, who died last week in South Africa, left instructions that his successor should have nothing to do with his body. This is the latest development in the bitter feud over funeral plans for the late president following his death at the age of 68. Elizabeth Mapari reports.
The government had planned to fly his body back home on Wednesday, but failed to do so because of a dispute with Lungu's family and his political party, the Patriotic Front, over mourning and funeral arrangements. The two leaders had been long-standing political rivals, with Hichilema defeating Lungu in the 2021 election after failing in 5 previous attempts. The PEF alleged that Lungu was banned from leaving the country for years and that if he had been allowed to travel to seek medical treatment sooner, he might still be alive. The government has denied the allegation. It says it wants to give Lungu, who led Zambia from 2015 to 2021, a state funeral.
The UN says that a telecommunications blackout in Gaza is paralyzing humanitarian operations. Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq says that heavy military activity has damaged the last fiber optic cables servicing the territory. Haq says that this has left agencies unable to contact teams on the ground.
This is not a routine outage, but a total failure of Gaza's digital infrastructure. Lifelines to emergency services, humanitarian coordination, and critical information for civilians have all been cut. There's a full internet blackout, and mobile networks are barely functioning. In a context already limited by physical access restrictions and widespread damage, emergency services are cut off, and civilians cannot access life-saving support.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, the COSAFA Cup defending champions Angola will meet Madagascar, and host South Africa will face Comoros in the semi-finals today. And JJ Spawn seizes the US Open lead as Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy struggle. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Kenyan lawyer, politician and fierce human rights advocate Martha Karua has been a formidable voice in East African politics. Known in Kenya as Kenya's Iron Lady, Karua has consistently championed democracy, the rule of law and women's rights, and this is both in and beyond her country's borders. A former Minister of Justice and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, she made history as the first woman to run on a major party presidential ticket when she joined Raila Odinga as his running mate in Kenya's 2022 general elections. And earlier this year, she launched the People's Liberation Party, signalling a new phase in her political journey, one centered on social justice and grassroots transformation. But her advocacy has also brought challenges. Last month, Karua was detained and deported from Tanzania, where she had gone to support opposition leader Tundu Lissu in court. She also is representing Ugandan opposition figure Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was reportedly abducted in Kenya and returned to Uganda to face treason charges. Well, today, Martha Karua joins us to reflect on her political mission, her ongoing regional advocacy, and the social-political currents that are shaping East Africa today. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. It really is an honor for us to have you on our program. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Ms. Karua, let's start with what's happening in your country right now. And I wonder what's played out in police custody, the death of Albert Ojwang and the protests that followed, and what looks like initially a police reaction which looks like made up story, a cover-up, and then backtracking. What does this tell us about the political climate in your country at this time?
I would say it's volatile, and that people are angry, and justifiably so. Police killings are on the rise, and this is yet another of extrajudicial killing by the police. This young man was fetched from his home. His father and family members were present. But as you know, people have no power to resist arrest by the police. So they hoped that because he has been taken in their presence, he would be safe. The next day he was dead. It's part of systemic torture of critics. A senior police officer was unhappy with posts the deceased had made on social media, And because we are told it's always good to give a name, the deceased Albert Ojwang had made on social media. And this just goes to show you that previously we've had abductions, murder, torture, disappearances of young people who criticize the regime of William Ruto, and especially William Ruto himself. You can see now it has morphed to senior police officers protecting themselves from any critical comment by going out, arresting, and executing their critics. So it's really a terrible time, and the youth of this country are fighting back. The opposition is fighting back, and we are saying no to extrajudicial killings. That is the mood in the country, despite very heavy police presence in the Central Business District yesterday, which was meant to prevent people from entering, protesters from entering the Nairobi Central Business District. But a lot of youth filtered in, and by 11, there was sizable presence. This is showing that people are not taking it lying down. Even under threat of death and torture, people are saying no to violation of their rights.
When did Kenya become this country? For a long time, as outsiders looking in, we always looked to Kenya and we thought it was, one of the flagship countries on the continent in terms of democracy, freedom of expression. Were there things bubbling under that we were not seeing, or what has happened over time that we're at this point where, as you say, this kind of repression begins from the highest office?
I think this has been simmering, but its worst has come under the leadership of Dr. William Ruto. The Constitution has all but been suspended without declaring so, because the rule of law has broken down, is no longer followed. He himself has openly threatened people that they can even be transported to heaven, which is a clear threat to being killed. And it is happening, it continues to happen. Kenyans are very vocal, were vocal even the days the Constitution had not been, overhauled to have a foundation of rights the way it has now. And after the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010, Kenyans have remained vocal irrespective of the circumstances. And I do hope that we continue this way to rid ourselves of autocratic rule and to safeguard, defend our Constitution, because it's the only thing that stands between us and total autocracy.
I'm going to come back to Kenya and your journey a little bit more in a short while. But while we're talking about this malaise of the shrinking democratic space, I want to talk about the region now. You were recently deported from Tanzania whilst attending a court session for opposition figure Tundu Lissu. What exactly happened there, and what does this incident tell us about the space in Tanzania and the region in general?
Like most East Africans, I hold an East African passport, which has the name Kenya, but it's an East African passport. As a citizen of East Africa, I am entitled to enter any of the East African countries freely. No visa is required, and unless if I've committed an offense or there are legal reasons for denying me entry, as a citizen of East Africa, I ought to enter without let or hindrance. This instance, we were a large group. We had gone to observe the case of Tundu Lissu. I was there to observe the same case on 24th of April and I had entered without let or hindrance, but maybe because I held a press conference after the court condemning what the repression that is occurring in Tanzania, they must have flagged off my passport, because this time when we arrived, the immigration officer asked me what I was entering to do. And I reminded him that as an East African, I didn't need a reason, and that I was a guest of the East African Law Society, of which I'm a member. And he said he's going to consult his superiors. So obviously there was a red flag on my entry, on my name. So we were eventually denied entry, not just myself, but two of the colleagues accompanying me who are on different queues than me. And we were detained for 6 hours before being deported to Kenya. I do sincerely believe that during that long wait, the Tanzanian government must have gotten in touch with Kenyan government, remembering that Dr. William Ruto is now the current chair of the East Africa community. There is no way Tanzania was going to deport high-profile Kenyans without talking to Kenya. So they must have given a nod for us to be deported. Just like in Kenya, in Tanzania, criminal trials are public and anybody can attend. The trial of Tundu Lissu, the key challenger to President Suluhu in the October elections this year, is a public trial. Treason is a criminal offense. Therefore, anybody could have gone to court. But Tanzania has been preventing people from accessing court. On the 24th, when I attended, there was a big battle outside the court, police brutalizing anybody attempting to get access to the court. People were injured, one person died. Chadema officials, that is the party of Tundu Lissu, his deputy, his secretary general, and many others were all arrested and detained until later that night. On this particular day, they denied us and access and returned us to Kenya. The case was on the Monday the 19th. And we still saw video clips of police pushing people, roughing them up, beating them up, and denying them access to the court. So it is something that Tanzania is doing deliberately. The statement by President Suluhu Samia, after we were deported at 5 p.m. that Sunday the 18th, that there were activists from other countries. He didn't name Kenya, but he alluded that we had messed up our country and now we were going to mess up Tanzania, and he was not going to allow, which is a baseless allegation. They did not accuse us of anything. They just deported us. This does not augur well for the East African community, which is a community for the people of East Africa, not for the leadership. But that now they are using it to oppress not just their nationals, but East Africa nationals. And that is what happened to us. It's something we must resist. We must resist the encroachment on our civil liberties within the Jumuiya. And that is why we found it necessary to go and stand in solidarity with Tundu Lissu. That is why I'm in Uganda defending Kizza Besigye. We need to stand with in solidarity with one another. And I'm hoping that SADC, because Tanzania is not just a member of the Jumuiya, it's also a member of SADC, that SADC will also do its duty by ensuring that Tanzania abides by the foundational principles of SADC, which are similar to those of East Africa, one of them being adherence to the rule of law, democracy, and human rights.
You mentioned Dr. Kizza Besigye. Could he have been abducted, removed from Kenya without the cooperation of senior figures in Kenyan government?
Absolutely not. In the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye, I think the top leadership of Kenya and top leadership of of Uganda communicated. There is no way Ugandan army officers can come to arrest somebody on Kenyan soil. It's a violation of territorial integrity. Kenya facilitated that. And Besigye and his friend Lutare were arrested by 8 officers. 4 of them turned out to be Ugandans, who then transported them back by road all the way up to Kampala. It therefore means that the other 4 were the Kenyan collaborators. So we are seeing a pattern where the 3 states in East Africa, the 3 original states of East Africa, because now we are joined by many others, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, have gone rogue and are collaborating to violate the rule of law, violate the rights of their citizens, and violate their civil liberties. Kenyan law, like Ugandan law, upholds due process. Besigye ought not to have been removed from Kenya without being presented to the Kenyan courts for them to authorize his removal and for him to have a chance to fight back. So this is the state violating, Kenya violating its own laws, and together with Uganda, violating international law. At the border, Besigye tells me that no document was stamped to show he and Rutale have left Kenya. They just left without any documentation, which is again trafficking in people. If it had not leaked that he was in Kampala, who knows, he could have been disappeared permanently. So we really are facing danger from the leadership in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. And I must mention that Burundi is no better. They are facing election. There's a crackdown on opposition parties. We have seen a pattern where the states are trying to prop up their own desired opposition parties and fighting the opposition parties identified as a threat to them. That has happened in Burundi. It's happening in Kenya, in Tanzania, and in Uganda. And really, the Africa, AU, and its organs that they have, like the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, ought to be very concerned about what is happening. There cannot be peace without justice. There cannot be peace without respect for human rights. There cannot be peace when states turn rogue, violate, and even execute their own nationals.
As a lawyer, where is the East African Court of Justice in all of this?
Well, we have, in our case, filed a case 2 days ago in the East African Court against the actions of deporting us arbitrarily and denying us entry into Tanzania. Lawyers are working to also file a case of torture and detention for Boniface Mwangi, a Kenyan activist, and Agatha Atuhaire, a Ugandan activist, who were not only detained, but were treated to inhuman and degrading treatment. They were tortured for days in Tanzania before finally being dumped at their respective countries' borders.
All right, let's go to your journey now. You ran as a deputy presidential candidate in 2022 alongside Raila Odinga. You've now formed
That's correct.
People's Liberation Party. Tell us about the formation of this party, establishing it, and what's different about your mission under this hat?
Let me say that the People's Liberation Party is a rebrand of a party that existed since 2006. The party's former name was NAK Kenya. Now we are the People's Liberation Party. We have rebranded. Our mission remains the same. We are big on social justice and on rights, on governance, good governance, transparency, and accountability. We have renewed our commitment to uphold these principles and to serve the people, indeed, to liberate the people from all types of oppression. And I am vying for the highest office, the presidency, under this party. And we are also collaborating with other opposition parties. We believe that in countries where there is suppression of opposition parties and civil liberties, it is necessary for the opposition to work together in order to defeat all the machinations of the oppressive regimes. But within that opposition in Kenya, it is my duty to advance my candidacy so that at the end of the day, I become that opposition candidate to liberate Kenya. And one of the things that I would do is return Kenya to the rule of law. Because without the foundation of the rule of law, it is not possible to deliver on the promises we give to the people. It is not possible to have an orderly society without abiding by the rules the country has agreed on, and that is the Constitution and the laws made under it. We believe in the People's Liberation Party that certain basic services must be provided to the people. Basic services and basic needs that support the right to life. And our Constitution in Article 43, not 33, re-emphasizes this. Therefore, we advocate for universal health care, quality universal health care for all, quality education for all, social support for vulnerable groups. We believe in supporting agriculture to enable food security. We believe in ensuring that there is the infrastructure to drive the economy. And we believe in a just economy that works for everybody, not just a few. A just economy is one that prioritizes the needs of the people. A just economy is one that keeps the taxation to where the people can afford, not an extractive regime that leaves families without the ability to put food on their table and to cater for the basic needs of the people.
Ms. Karua, putting yourself in front and in opposition, does that make you a target? Are you already preparing yourself for harassment and possibly even attacks?
It does make one a target, but I share the risk with other opposition colleagues. I have lived all my life under similar threats, except for a short period during the Kibaki era, where individuals were not targeted. Under the KANU regime of the late President Moi, we were targets as young activists. I lived through that, and as an opposition member lived under the same threat. So it is not something to worry about. We have a job to do to liberate our country, and nobody else will come here to clean this mess. It has to be us, and I step up for my country. And happily, many Kenyans have stepped up.
You've long been a vocal advocate for women's leadership. How do you assess the pace of progress in things like gender equity in governments across East Africa today?
In Uganda, they've achieved the gender quotas, and also in Tanzania. In Kenya, though our constitution decrees that we do so, we have not obeyed the constitution. But there is increased women's participation. I would like to measure women's participation not just by the numbers in parliament, it is by how society treats women. In Kenya now we are dealing with rising cases of femicide, of domestic violence, of gender-based attacks and violence on women. We cannot say we are there. We need deliberate efforts making, but we start to change gender relations in society and to have a culture of mutual respect between the genders. And that is something my administration would prioritize.
And perhaps finally, I mean, you've served in nearly every branch of public life, from the courts to cabinet, politics, campaigning, human rights activism. What keeps you going despite all of these challenges? And what's the mission that remains for you paramount?
I would say that the need to get it done. This is my home. Kenya is my home. And just like in my house, if I entered to find things littered on the floor, I will not walk over them. I will pick them even as I seek to know who is responsible for the mess. So in Kenya, we are seeing mess all around us, violation of human rights, deterioration of essential services, theft and corruption. This is a mess all around us. I will not walk over the mess in my home, Kenya. I will begin to do something about it and to stand in solidarity in others so that we may be able to clear the mess. This is a calling from within me. It's also a civic duty to my country. And I think this is what we all must do, not just the civic duty to our country, but the civic duty to our region and to Africa. And we look up to all people of goodwill in Africa to show leadership so that together Africa will rise.
Advocate Martha Karua, it really has been an honor and a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us some of your time.
Thank you for having me. Asante.
Asante sana. Thank you. That was Advocate Martha Karua, veteran politician, former Minister of Justice, and an unwavering advocate for democracy and the rule of law, human rights, speaking to us about the political challenges not just in her country but in the region generally across East Africa, and her continued fight for freer, fairer continent. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
South Africa's Defence Minister Angie Motshekga, along with the National Defence Command, are set to receive the first group of over 2,000 South African National Defence Force soldiers. Today, the SANDF members were part of a UN and SADC peace mission in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema is forbidden to be anywhere near his predecessor's body, Edgar Lungu. The former president, who died last week in South Africa, left clear instructions that his successor should have nothing to do with his body. And patients in England will be among the first in the world to have access to what's described as an innovative Trojan horse treatment for blood cancer. The therapy sneaks toxic drugs inside cancer cells and destroys them. I'll have more details at the top of the hour.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time for your sport, and I wonder what we have to look forward to this weekend. And it's telling us all about the sport is Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Brace yourself for the semi-finals of the 2025 COSAFA Cup will take place today. Defending champions Angola meet up against Madagascar, and host South Africa will face Comoros after the semi-final lineup was completed at the COSAFA Cup. The first semi-final will see Angola up against Madagascar at 1500 hours Central African Time, while South Africa clash with Comoros at 1800 hours Central African Time. Both games at the Free State Stadium in South Africa's Free State Province. Now on to cricket news ongoing in Lords. David Bedingham says the Proteas are very excited about the opportunity to break their ICC trophy drought ahead of what could be a pivotal third day of the World Test Championship final at Lords. Bedingham top scored in his team's first innings with 45 out of a paltry total of 138 all out to concede a lead of 74 following Australia's 212 on the first day. Bedingham believes that they have what it takes to pull off a successful run chase and win a first ICC trophy in 27 years.
We're very confident. I think the batters will have their plans. But yeah, I think it's an amazing day. And I think when they started batting in their third innings, I think we would have definitely had them or taken them 220 for 8. So I think, yeah, very confident, and I think there's a massive belief in this team.
Bedingham also praised the efforts of Lungingiti after the paceman bowled a 9-over spell to take 3 for 35 to break open the Australian innings. Bedingham speaks about Lungingiti.
Lungi's a chill guy, so I don't think it would have affected him that much. But yeah, I think he was struggling with that end, and I think as soon as he changed ends, he looked a lot more comfortable. And for him to bowl 9 overs on the bounce takes a massive amount of effort. And yeah, I think we're very lucky to have him.
Athletics Kenyan runner Faith Cherotich is making waves in the world of chase, recently shattering the Oslo Diamond League meet record with a time of 9 minutes, 02.60 seconds. This impressive win saw her outpace Olympic champion Winfred Yavi for the second time in a row yesterday. Cherotich, who previously earned a bronze at the 2023 World Championships, is now a strong favorite for the gold medal at the upcoming World Athletics Championships in Tokyo, carrying the hopes of a running proud nation. Let's end with golf news. US golfer JJ Spaun set the clubhouse target with a stunning 4 under 66, where he carried the only bogey-free round of the day and equaled the best start to a US Open at Oakmont Country Club. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fire Lengwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Framo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Bringing you the energy, news and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Time now for a final business news update on Rise and Shine. Here's Tabiso Lehuko.
business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. South Africa's Statistician General, Risenga Maluleke, has called on Capitec Chief Executive Officer Gerrie Fourie to publicly present his method of determining the country's unemployment rate. This after Fourie questioned the Statistics South Africa's employment figures. He's argued that the country's unemployment data excludes those employed in the informal sector. Fourie says if the individuals were to be added, then the country's unemployment rate would be close to 10%. Maluleke says the Statistics SA's data is beyond reproach.
About 3 weeks ago, I released the quarterly labor force survey. We have reported on the informal sector, and I said the number of people in the informal sector are 3.3 million, and they account for about 19.9% of all people employed in South Africa.
South Africa's Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, says that the government has set aside $863 million for the procurement of vaccines to help stop the spread of foot-and-mouth disease. Steenhuisen was speaking at the Red Meat Abattoir Association's 31st Congress in Somerset West outside Cape Town yesterday. He says 900,000 of the vaccines are set to be rolled out this month.
Well, the rollout will start as soon as the vaccines arrive from Botswana. We procure foot-and-mouth vaccines from the Botswana Vaccine Institute because we don't produce locally, although that is something that's being worked on by the Agricultural Research Council. And we hope to, in the short to medium term, be able to have our own vaccine here in South Africa.
The G20 Digital Economy Working Group will produce a final report on its priority areas to be signed by all communication ministers of member states in September this year. That's according to the Chief Director of Emerging Technologies in the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, Janet Morane. Delegates from all 20 countries had gathered in Polokwane, Limpopo province this week. It was a 3-day meeting, started on Monday and ended on Wednesday, discussing digital connectivity, the use of technology to deliver services, and artificial intelligence technology. Economists say Kenya has a spending problem that has seen the government spending nearly a third of the country's budget on debt repayment and a public wage bill. President William Ruto's administration has been struggling to narrow the fiscal deficit and is seeking new sources of funding to avoid tax hikes and austerity measures that saw countrywide protests last year. Kenya's finance minister is John Mbadi.
We face the challenges of mobilizing higher tax revenues as we must balance the need for increased revenues with the need to keep the cost of doing business low to stimulate economic growth.
Oil prices have advanced nearly 8% after Israel launched a preemptive strike against Iran. The attack has fueled concerns over potential supply disruptions. The prospect of a broader Middle East conflict has threatened to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical route for about 20% of international oil flows. Other factors boosting prices was EIA data showing that U.S. crude decreased by more than expected last week, signaling robust demand, potentially boosting economic growth and oil consumption. It is currently trading at $77.97 a barrel. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 536, Botswana 13.20, Kenya 128 shilling for 13, and Zambia 24 kwacha 60. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 rand 53. Russia 79 rubles 82. India 85 rupees 55. China 7 yuan 17. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 76. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities markets, gold is trading at $3,442 and platinum $1,290 per ounce. Brand crude oil is at $78.06 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to discuss with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459 for Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg. I'm Tabisolo Huku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
A deepening row has erupted over the funeral arrangements of Zambia's late former president Edgar Lungu, who passed away last week in South Africa at the age of 68. According to a family spokesperson and lawyer, Makebi Zulu, Lungu had left specific instructions that the current president, Hakainde Hichilema, should not be anywhere near Lungu's body. The Zambian government had planned to repatriate the body on Wednesday, but those efforts stalled following a dispute with Lungu's family and the opposition Patriotic Front Party over how his funeral should be handled. In a video message released from South Africa on Thursday, Zulu said that the family had made independent arrangements to respect the late president's final wishes and proceed with a private funeral.
Ladies and gentlemen, a statement on behalf of the Edgar Chagua Lungu family from Joburg in South Africa. On Thursday, 5th June 2025, the 6th Republican President, Dr. Edgar Chagua Lungu, died here in South Africa. Following his death, the family has had several engagements with the government of the Republic of Zambia with two delegations. The first was led by Mr. Mlambo Haimbe, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the second by Mr. Enoch Kavindele, a former president who was deputized by Mr. Leslie Mbula, a former secretary to the cabinet. In the company of the said two was and is Mr. Patrick Kangwa, the current secretary to the cabinet. At the said meetings, it was made known that the family had already put in place all logistics to address the wishes of the deceased that his mortal remains be conveyed by the family privately and not the government of the Republic of Zambia, and that President Hakainde Hichilema should not be anywhere near the body of President Edgar Chagua Lungu for reasons that have since become common cause. The family is disturbed by the desire of the government of the Republic of Zambia to convey the mortal remains of the 6th Republican President in ways that suggest that they have no say, that is the family, that the family has no say in the manner the same will be conveyed and how they desire that he be mourned. In the conveyance of the remains, it is the desire of the family that the conscience of the deceased should not be betrayed and that the death of the 6th Republican President does not repose any superior rights to the government that exceed those of the family. In the said meetings, the government changed positions on proposals that they earlier said were agreeable after returning from purported consultations. The family finds it difficult to continue engaging with the government, which has preset conditions that suggest that the family has no say in the fundamental issues relating to the manner the deceased is to be mourned and the conveyance of his remains. Matters of conscience for both the deceased and the family should not be sacrificed at the altar of convenience by the government. The family remains committed to the 6th Republican President being mourned in a befitting manner by both the nation, foreign dignitaries, and the family. The public will be informed on alternative arrangements amongst the available options. I thank you.
That was Makebi Zulu, legal representative for the Lungu family, speaking on the ongoing tensions surrounding the funeral of the late former President Edgar Lungu, who died in South Africa last week, sparking a political and personal tug of war and how he should be laid to rest. We'll keep on top of that story for you. Time now for this week's edition of African Arty Beats, and that's Channel Africa's window into the continent's creative heartbeat. And in this week's report, Nhlanhla takes us to Johannesburg, where the Afro Exchange Creative Summit brought together cultural innovators and boundary pushers from across Africa. She also has details on this year's Mandela Day celebrations, which will include a special music festival tribute. Here's Nhlanhla Mahlangu with African Arty Beats.
Welcome to this week's African Arty Beats exclusive to Channel Africa, The African Perspective. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu. In this week's segment, the Afro Exchange Summit launches and this year's Mandela Day activities to include a music festival. The Afro Exchange Creative Summit, a gathering of bold minds, boundary pushers, and cultural tastemakers shaping the future of creativity, took place in Johannesburg, South Africa this week. Designed to spark dialogue and imagination, the event celebrated the intersection of innovation, culture, and bold flavor. More from Ifeyoma Agu, Group Head of Culture, Influencers and Advocacy at Diageo, Southern, West, and Central Africa.
Afro Exchange is a cultural platform that Johnny Walker has put together to celebrate African creativity by bringing 2 African cities at a time to celebrate their creative energies and, most importantly, kind of showcase the values and culture, which usually will cut across music, art, fashion, food, and typically African flavors.
And ultimately, what is it that you'd like to achieve through the summit?
Yeah, so through the summit, Johnny Walker is looking to reinforce his role in culture. Our efforts is keep walking, and we've always stood for progress, resilience, and really amplifying African creativity. And so for us, this platform is an opportunity to create a cultural bridge to allow for Africans to drive their influence without borders. As it exists, a lot of creatives really have ambitions and are daring to create and looking for spaces to drive creative experimentation. But what this platform then gives them is an avenue to begin to showcase it themselves. Whether you're an artist, a musician, you're a tastemaker, you're a content creator, this platform exists to give creatives a platform to collaborate, to drive creative experimentation, which is what Johnny Walker is really looking to do. We know the world is paying attention, so how do we as Johnny Walker continue to amplify the voices of Africans and continue to also drive that global influence that African creativity is having? So this is about inspiring the young talents, the young generation, to keep working, to push boundaries, and to embrace creative experimentation across borders, and to really go after this by, unleashing their authentic selves, by unleashing their creativity without boundaries.
And is this a once-off summit, or are we likely to see more of this collaboration?
There's going to be a lot of it because what Afro Exchange really represents is always bringing 2 cities. So this first edition is Johannesburg and Lagos. So we're going to have another installation, and this first one is this creative summit is an opportunity to kind of showcase to the media, to the public, what we're about. The first real event of Afro Exchange will then come through on the 28th of June of this month at Kialami Prix. There you're going to see the full definition of Afro Exchange through music, fashion, art, a collaboration of Nigerian artists and Johannesburg artists come through across food, arts, fashion, and music. So that's going to be the first real one. Today is a summit to kind of really drive cultural dialogue. The main execution of it will happen on 28th. And then we'll take it to Lagos as well and do an Afro Exchange as well in Lagos. And we'll continue to tour Africa, bringing 2 cities at every point in time to showcase creativity.
The Nelson Mandela Foundation on Wednesday launched the Mandela Day 2025 in Houghton, Johannesburg, South Africa. Mandela Day is an annual global celebration held on the 18th of July to celebrate the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. The day serves as a call to action for individuals, communities, and organizations to take the time to reflect on Mandela's values and principles and make a positive impact in their own communities. The foundation's Tepang Mutsekua says this year's events includes a music concert.
This year we thought we could have a little bit fun on Mandela Day, and we have partnered with Baseline Fest. And Baseline Fest will be hosting a special celebration, the History of House show, with a special tribute to Nelson Mandela, performed by Grammy-nominated, everybody says I pronounce this wrong, it shows my age, Moda, and 3 times Grammy Award winners, Soweto Gospel Choir. Patrons are encouraged to bring blankets to donate. The Baseline team will make sure that they get to the right people who need them, or you can make a small donation on web ticket to the foundation. And the event will also be a platform for live music lab students to volunteer to gain practical experience. You can go to the Baseline Fest website to find out about it.
Asimbonanga Bonangu Mandela Tina Lape Kona Lape Heli Kona Asimbonanga Asimbonangu Mandela Tina Lape Kona Lape Heli Kona.
That's it from this week's African RT Beats. Until next Friday for Channel Africa, I am Ntlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Yeah, always enjoy listening to the arts and culture of African RT Beats each week with Ntlanhla Mahlangu. On a Friday, On the Move also gets quite arty actually. Music is always a common feature, and to tell us a little bit more of what we can get excited about is our very own Benjamin. How are you doing, my brother?
Yeah, I think you should keep convincing your team to give us that artsy beat on a Friday.
There you have it.
It will just sound better on the move, you know?
You know what? We want at least something.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. There's a lot of seriousness, so this is a very important moment to have for you.
Gosh, especially on a Friday.
All right, today we're going to be speaking about a very important subject matter. I don't know how much of a difference it makes. I don't know if we need to go this direction, but we're going to be speaking about the African brands economy. What do we need to do to ensure that our indigenous African brands actually get that global recognition? The question is, do we have enough that are appealing to the global markets? And also, are those markets accessible to us as Africans? I think that's the big question as well.
You know what's fascinating? I did something with somebody who's a brand architect and brand specialist. Sadly, international brands, I think as much as 70%, international brands are what are preferred by Africans. So when we go to the shops, we actually look for international brands first beyond local brands. So we actually need to re-engineer our own minds about our own products even before we start talking about
accessing external markets.
External markets, indeed. So it's really sad to hear, but I guess, it could be a hang-up of colonialism, Western marketing perhaps is influencing us, that for the longest time we always thought that foreign was better. But you know what? There are some brands doing it. Is it Makosi from the East? Makosa,
yeah.
Doing amazing things.
Sure. Black coffee.
Yeah. And also some of our big telephone operators.
Yes.
Mobile phone operators.
Sure.
Also stamping across the continent. Banks, a couple of them as well. So it's not a dead loss.
Yes.
But we certainly have to work on it ourselves.
Fantastic. I think you should do that interview. I'll just watch, and then as soon as you're done with that interview, I'll just kind of like, okay, let me take over.
So another brand that's doing things is China, isn't it? And but that's another conversation altogether. Anyway, that is how we come to the end of today's edition of Rise and Shine. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. We'll be back on Monday morning, June 16. Such an important day for South Africa. We'll have a special program for you on Monday morning. But stay with us. On the Move coming up after the news with Nolutando Butelezi. It's 9 o'clock.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. South Africa's Defence Minister Angie Motshekga, along with the National Defence Command, are set to receive the first group of over 2,000 South African National Defence Force soldiers in Bloemfontein today. The SANDF members were part of the UN